and welcome to Makeup and Monarchies. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany. I am a makeup artist, hairstylist, and lover of all things UK history, medieval history. Come for the makeup, stay for the history. So this week we're going to be talking about Stirling Castle. This is my favorite castle I've ever been to. It is phenomenal. I wanted to talk about this a little bit because last week we did go over the First War of Scottish Independence. So a lot was done and centered around Stirling. So I just wanted to talk about it a little bit. It is a beautiful castle. I've been to Edinburgh and Stirling's my favorite. So yeah, if you're new here and you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. Make sure that the bell has been rung so you receive notifications of when I post. If you like this episode, please give it a thumbs up. And if you feel so inclined, leave a comment just to help with the algorithm or let me know that you watched it. As usual, everything I'm going to use today is listed down below in the description box. And I think that's it. So with that being said, let's get into it. Hello. So today we're talking Stirling Castle. And if you have not been there, you need to go because it is amazing. So Stirling Castle, this magnificent castle, sits on top of Castle Hill, which forms part of the Stirling Sill. So the sill is a formation of quartz dolerite that is around 350 million years old. If you are not following the Scottish geologist on Instagram, I highly suggest you do. I think she is fantastic and she really goes in. She's very knowledgeable about the geology of Scotland and it's really interesting to listen to. Anywho, getting my concealer. This thing is on its last legs. We're in the dregs of this. So it was modified by glaciation to form a crag and tail. So a crag is formed when a glacier or an ice sheet passes over an area. Just make sure I get all these spots that hold a resistant rock formation, which is usually granite, a volcanic plug, or another kind of volcanic structure. The tail is the gradual fan or ridge that forms into a arched ramp or a tapered ramp, much like Castle Rock, where Edinburgh Castle sits on the crag or the craig, and the Royal Mile is the tail. I believe Arthur's Seat is like this yes it is. Arthur's Seat is like this as well. So there are quite a few of them in Scotland. So when the Romans first made it to the British Isles and made their way to Scotland, they passed Stirling and made a fort at Doon. Later it could have been the stronghold of the Managodden, I think that's how you say that, which was the narrow coastal region of the south side of the Firth of Forth, which was part of the Brythonic-speaking Kingdom of Gododin in the post-Roman era. This area came under Pictish control after they defeated the Northumbrians at the Battle of Dunnectane 30 years later. Again, if I'm pronouncing any of this wrong, just let me know in the comments, please. The first record that can be traced for Stirling is when Alexander I dedicated a chapel there around 1100. It looks like it had been established as a royal hub by this time period. Alexander I died there in 1124, and during the reign of his successor, David I, it became a royal borough and an important administration place. In 1174, William I was captured by the English. I'm going to shift around a little bit, I think. That does not belong here anymore. And was forced to surrender several castles under the Treaty of Fallujah. Stirling and Edinburgh castles were part of that. There's nothing showing that the English really actually occupied the castle, and it was eventually given back by Richard I of England in 1189. Stirling continued to be a favored royal residence, and William died there in 1214 at the age of 72 when a previous deer park built by William, Alexander III laid out a new park in the 1260s. Stirling stayed the center of the royal administration under Alex III until 1286 when he died. As we know from 2 weeks ago, this set the ball rolling for a ton of turmoil in the country for the next several decades. Edward I demanded Stirling and other royal castles be put under his control and expected John Balliol to be a puppet ruler, but John refused. Good on you, buddy. In 1296, Edward found Stirling Castle abandoned and used it as a key site. I'm just going to pull my hair back a little bit. They left the following year after the Scots won the Battle of Stirling Bridge. In 1297, the Scots abandoned it again after their loss at the Battle of Falkirk. The castle was strengthened by Edward, but it was besieged by Robert the Bruce in 1299. Since Edward failed to relieve the garrison, they were forced to surrender. In 1303, with England having the upper hand, hold on, I'm just gonna jump in here real quick. I got some new shadows from MAC. I'm sorry, those are like my favorite, and I'm just using, I think this one's called Antiqued, but it's really, really pretty. This is more of a fall shade for me, but we're gonna go with it. I was gonna be really cheesy and do like sterling silvers today, but I'm not doing that. So in 1303, with England having the upper hand, Stirling was the last castle still remaining in Scottish hands. But Edward's army came again in April of 1304, and the Scots left the castle again. But a portion of the garrison was ordered back into the castle by Edward because he planned on using his trebuchet warwolf. He destroyed the castle's gatehouse. Edward died in 1307, and Robert the Bruce was now King of Scotland. Stirling was one of those castles still held by the English in Arkham 1313. Sounds like an unlucky year. Or am I being superstitious? And Edward Bruce, Robert's brother, laid siege to Stirling. By June 24th, Philip Mowbray, who was holding Stirling, proposed a bargain that he would surrender the castle if it wasn't relieved by the English within 1 year. Edward Bruce agreed and left. Well, don't you know, Edward II of England made his way to Stirling Castle the next summer on June 23rd, they were a fucking day shy. On June 23rd of 1314, King Robert's army met the English at the Battle of Bannockburn, which was in sight of the castle walls. The English won, and it sealed the deal on Stirling Castle. But when King Edward II tried to take refuge within the castle, Mowbray forced the English to leave so he could keep his word. Mowbray handed over the castle to King Robert and changed sides as well. Robert ordered the castle to be slighted to prevent occupation by the English again. Slighting is when deliberate damage is done to a castle or a building to devalue it. Or reduce the value. So there would be nothing, that they wouldn't want it for anything because it was in ruins basically. During the Second War of Scottish Independence, bear with me here because I'm gonna try something. I'm a little nervous, but during the Second War of Scottish Independence, Stirling was under the control of the English. By 1336, Thomas Rokeby was the commander, and he allowed extensive work to be done to the castle. Andrew Murray, you see me? So I'm just going in with a smaller brush. This is a MAC 233. This thing is old as hell, older than my youngest child. So I'm just going in to almost put the shadow down, and then I'll go back in and buff out again, but I'm looking for density, and then I'll go back in. Not gonna want to watch this, are you? Andrew Murray attempted a siege in 1337, and this may have been when the guns were used in Scotland for the first time. Robert Stewart retook Stirling during 1341, 1342, and there in a siege. Maurice Murray was made its keeper. In 1360, Robert de Forsyth was made the governor of Stirling Castle, and this was passed on to his son John, and then his grandson William, that was his name. So I'm just gonna go in here and kind of fill in the area I'm trying to fill in. It was under the first two Stuart kings, Robert II and Robert III, that the earliest surviving parts of the castle were built. Robert Stuart was regent of Scotland for his brother Robert III and undertook works on the north and south gate. The north gate we see now is built on the foundations of the 1380s, which is the earliest surviving masonry of the castle. The castle was part of the jointure that was given to James I's wife, Joan Beaufort. This established a tradition that later monarchs continued. When James I was murdered in 1437, which I did a video on James I, so you can go back in and watch that. That is in either the Scotland playlist or I'll just link it down below. Queen Joan took shelter in Stirling at the castle with her young son, the now King James II. He went on to host a tournament at Stirling. Ask me what I'm doing today. I have no idea. Does this look a mess right now? Yep. But we're gonna see what we make out of this. It's actually nice out today. I'm gonna go back in because I just buffed that top line out. I don't know what this looks like on camera, but it looks crazy. There we go. That's better. So I'm actually gonna go through with a lighter color in this part just to calm that down a little bit. So James II went on to host a tournament at Stirling. I'm gonna say, where the fuck is my brush? Again, and then it'll appear because that's what happens every time. So this is I always use this brush, but Malt. I just have a spot in here that I'm not crazy about. So I'm just gonna go, I know that makeup looks wild when you're doing it, but then the end result comes out good. So he hosted a tournament at Stirling on Shrove Tuesday in 1449. Let's see if I can find that again. I'm gonna get side. We are having the best ADHD moment today, aren't we? I'm just gonna go back in here and just pack that color in. I really like this. It's really pretty. I'll list it down below. I'm pretty sure it's antiqued though. This included a combat between two teams of 3. One team was led by Jacques de Lalande. He was a Burgundian knight. And the other was led by James Douglas, a brother of the Earl of Douglas. The Burgundians won. In 1452, William, the 8th Earl of Douglas, refused to end a possible treasonous alliance with the Earls of Ross and Crawford. James stabbed and killed him at Stirling. James III was born at the castle and went on to undertake the works to the gardens and the chapel. Manufacturing of artillery in the castle was recorded in 1475. In 1486, James's wife, Margaret of Denmark, died at Stirling. And then 2 years later, James died at the Battle of Sockburn, which is about 2 miles south of Stirling. Funny enough, well, not funny haha, but this battle was fought over almost the same ground as the Battle of Bannockburn. So the castle that we actually see today was constructed between 1490 and 1560. Or I'm sorry, 1490 and 1600. I pulled that number right out. It was thought that Stirling Castle was made as a principal royal center by the Stuart kings James IV, James V, and James VI. The architecture shows a mix of English, French, and German influences, and it reflects the international ambitions of the Stuart dynasty. I'm going to jump off real quick and I'm going to do my liner, so I'll be right back. So James IV kept a full Renaissance court that included an alchemist and wanted to establish a palace of European standing in Stirling. He had works at the royal residences of Edinburgh, Falkland, and Linlithgow, but the biggest were at Stirling. The King's Old Building, the Great Hall, and the Forework were the main ones. He renovated the chapel and got the approval from the Pope to establish a college of priests in 1501. The new portcullis was painted with red lead and linseed oil. The gardener built archery butts next to the stable in 1504. James played tennis with the Spanish ambassador there as well. The work on the castle that James IV started wasn't finished by the time of his death at the Battle of Flodden. His son James V was crowned at the chapel in Stirling and grew up there under the guardianship of Lord Erskine. However, in 1515, the young king's regent, John Stuart, brought 7,000 men to the castle to gain control of James from his mother, Margaret Tudor, who was the daughter of Henry VII and Elizabeth of York, older sister to, Henry VIII. So, James continued to expand on his father's building plans. A centerpiece of the castle was created and the royal palace was built under Sir James Hamilton of Finnart, and masons were brought in from France. Like his father, James died young and the work was not completed, and the work was completed by his second wife, Marie de Guise. After his death, his baby daughter, Mary, the now queen, was brought to Stirling Castle for safety and was crowned there on September 9th of 1543. Like her father, she was raised at Stirling until she was about 5 when she left for France, or she was sent to France. Her mother stayed regent of Scotland and ruled for her daughter. Mary returned to Scotland in 1561 after the death of her first husband, Francis. So you can check out my episode on Mary, and I'll link that down below in the description box. Mary visited Stirling often and nursed Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, when he was sick with an illness there. They were married not long after he recovered, and then Mary became pregnant with their child and gave birth to their son James at Edinburgh Castle. Fun fact, I've seen the room that he was born in. He was baptized at Stirling Castle in December of 1566. It was a huge celebration. It included fireworks, an assault on a fake castle, and a mask designed by Bastian and a mask. The couple were already estranged because a few months prior to James's birth, Mary's secretary was brutally murdered in front of her, and Darnley, her husband, had something to do with it. So Darnley was living at the castle, but he didn't attend the baptism celebrations. The Earl of Mar was made hereditary governor of the castle in 1566 while he was guardian of the baby James. When Mary was traveling from Stirling, I think she was heading to Edinburgh, she was abducted by James Hepburn, Lord Bothwell, or Earl Bothwell. This was the first move in a domino of events that led Mary to abdicate the throne to her son and her exile in England. Mary ended up escaping her imprisonment at Lochleven Castle on May 2nd of 1568. I only know that because it was one of my fun facts on like a few weeks ago on Instagram. There we go. I like to keep this out because after I do powder, I like to go back in with my blush. The Earl of Mar immediately, once she escaped, the Earl of Mar was ordered to ramp up security at Stirling Castle and around the king, as well as send everybody away from the castle except for his closest friends and his family. Little James was crowned at the Church of the Holy Rood in Stirling City and grew up in the castle in the care of Annabel Murray, Countess of Mar. There was a tennis court built for little King James in 1576. Because of the situation of his mother, he was used as a pawn between his regents and the supporters of his mother, and Stirling was the base of his supporters. William Kirkcaldy of Grange headed a raid on Stirling in 1571 in an attempt to round up Mary's enemies, but he failed to gain control of the castle and the king. Alexander Erskine of Gogar, keeper of the castle, was thrown out by the supporters of the regent Mort in April of 1578. Alexander's son had been recently killed during a struggle at the gate. It's claimed that the 11-year-old King James tore his hair out of fear that Alexander himself was or had been injured. The Earls of Mar and Angus seized the castle in 1584. But when the king showed up with an army, they fled to England. They came back the following year and forced the king to surrender, even though they proclaimed to be loyal to him. James went on to marry Anne of Denmark on August 20th of 1589. When she became pregnant with their first child, she went to Stirling to give birth in 1593. The castle wasn't being maintained, so James ordered it be repaired, and Anne gave birth to their son Prince Henry, in 1594. He was baptized at the chapel on August 30th. Just like his father and grandfather, Henry was raised at Stirling and under the second Earl of Mar. What do we got going on now? Oh, we need this. We need this. He was there until 1603 when James succeeded Elizabeth I on the English throne and the royal family left for London. After James VI left, Stirling became a military center. It was used as a prison and had very few royal visits. James VI did return for a quick visit in July of 1617. Some repair was done to the castle to prepare for a visit from Charles I in 1625, but he didn't come until 1633 and only stayed briefly. After Charles I was executed, bear with me while I do this. It's a new one, so I don't like stuff when it's brand new. I like when it gets a little wear to it and it dries out a little bit. I know, my hand's a mess. I just saw that. So after Charles I was executed, Charles II was crowned by the Scots and was the last reigning monarch to stay at the castle. Oh shit, gotta blend that out now. There we go. Okay. Ooh. We're gonna go back in and blend that out once it dries down. That is bad. After Charles I was executed, Charles II was crowned and was the last reigning monarch to stay at the castle when he lived there in 1650. Royalist forces were defeated. I'm not doing this on camera. Royalist forces were defeated at Dunbar by Oliver Cromwell, and the king was moved south to Worcester to defeat them. General Monarch laid siege to the castle in August 6th of 1651, putting up gun platforms in the adjacent built churchyard. After the garrison turned on William, Cunningham, was forced to surrender on August 14th. The damage the castle took can still be seen on the church and the Great Hall. Okay, so I'm going to jump off really quickly and I am going to do my mascara. So after the restoration of Charles II, the Earl of Mar was made governor again, and the castle was often used as a prison. What is that stuck on? Okay. When George I ascended the throne in 1714, John Erskine, 4th Earl of Mar, was deprived of the governorship and the post of the Scottish secretary. Because of this, he raised the standard of James Stuart, the Old Pretender, in the Jacobite Rising of 1715. Government troops under the Duke of Argyll moved fast to occupy the fortress, then moved on to Sheriffmuir to block Mar's way. The Battle of Sheriffmuir had no clear victor, and the rising was over for a short time. Now, gonna get into a little bit where I don't cover, but I do love. The Jacobite Rising was not over, and in 1745, Bonnie Prince Charles Edward Stuart led his army of Highlanders past Stirling on their way to Edinburgh and came back after they retreated from England in January of 1746. No, Jamie Fraser was not there, and neither was Claire. Just saying. From 1800 until the 20th century, I have mascara on my finger. It was mainly used as barracks. However, Queen Victoria and the Prince of Wales visited in 1859. But it's now been done back to its former beauty. Oh, there we go. Oh, I'm gonna have a hard time with this one. I need tweezers, stop. Perfect. Done with that. Okay, now we can move on to this. So the work on the restoration cost around £12 million and lasted 10 years, being completed in the summer of 2011. The tapestry studio at West Dean College near Chichester in West Sussex had been working on, I don't know what I'm gonna do for lipstick today. I feel like something very subtle, I guess. Had been working on recreating the Hunt of the Unicorn tapestries. 4 are now hanging in the restored Queen's Presence Chamber and in the Royal Palace. Historians that study the reign of James V think this and a similar series were part of tapestries of the royal collection. Stirling Castle has remained headquarters of the Argyle the Argyle and Sutherland Highlanders. There is a regimental museum in the castle as well. Do you want to go over like the architecture a little bit of it? The castle itself is made up of different areas. So the outer defenses are the outer walls, and the ones we see there now were built in the 1700s. There are some parts that were from Marie de Guise, her regency. There we go. That have lasted and included the French spur. The forework were the defenses that guarded the main body of the castle. The gatehouse was broken down gradually and consolidated into its present form in 1810. At each end of the crenulated curtain wall was a rectangular tower. The west tower is known as the Prince's Tower, most likely after Prince Henry, and survives to its fullest height and is now attached to a later palace. At the east end, the Elphinstone Tower held the kitchen and probably an officer's lodging. This was taken down to form a gun battery, more than likely in the early 1700s when the outer defenses were rebuilt. So inside the forework is a courtyard called the Outer Close. The early north gate held the OG castle kitchens. More than likely, this was linked to the Great Hall. To the west of the outer close is the main parts of the castle that are arranged around the inner close. The Royal Palace is to the south. The King's Old Building is to the west. The Royal Chapel is to the north. And the Great Hall is to the east. So if you look at, actually I'll probably just put a picture in here. So this picture, notice there's one building that's like brightly colored. That is the church. Or the chapel. The King's Old Building is the oldest part of the castle and was completed around 1497 under James IV. It started as a new residential range and was originally made up of an L-shaped building. It kind of still looks like that. The principal rooms were on the first floor. If you're American, that is the second floor. First floor is, or like our first floor is their ground floor. So they were over cellars. It included 2 chambers with wide open views to the west. Listen, it's a stunning view. Absolutely stunning. Breathtaking views. The Great Hall is just that. It's great. It's on the east side of the inner close. This too was built by James IV. It has been described as one of the grandest secular buildings erected in Scotland in the late Middle Ages. A number of English craftsmen worked on it and has been compared to Edward IV's hall in Eltham Palace in Kent. It has Renaissance details and in a conventional medieval plan. There are 5 fireplaces inside with 2 large windows lighting the area the king would have been seated. The royal palace itself is breathtaking. It was the first Renaissance palace in the whole of the UK, and we have James V to thank for this. It has a Renaissance architecture with late Gothic detail and one of the most impressive buildings in Scotland. Work on this started in the 1530s and was done by the late 1540s. Inside there are 2 apartments, one for the king and one for the queen. Both have a hall, presence chamber, bed chamber, and small rooms that are called closets. The ceiling of the king's presence chamber was originally decorated with carved oak portrait rounds that are known as the Stirling ceiling heads. They were removed after a ceiling collapsed in 1777. 38 survived out of the original 56. Some of them were thought to be kings, queens, courtiers, and biblical figures. The apartment you tour today have obviously been restored to the time where or when Mary, Queen of Scots, was raised there. The Royal Chapel was originally a little south of where it sits now. It was established by James IV, and this is the chapel where Mary, Queen of Scots, was crowned at the age of 9 months on September 9th of 1543. James VI, her son, had it rebuilt to baptize his son there. The gardens, let me tell you, absolutely amazing. Not just because I'm a sucker for flowers, but the view is incredible. The gardens that you walk through now was built on a medieval jousting arena that was known as the Round Table to imitate the court of King Arthur. So today you can tour it and explore the castle on a self-guided tour or with a group. And I'll tell you, this is my favorite castle I've ever been to. It's amazing just because you feel the age of it, and it's just beautiful. You're greeted by a statue of Robert the Bruce right before you walk through the gates to get in. And the views are sensational. Just to the west, you can see the Wallace Monument in all of its glory. This is a must visit. It's a short train ride from Edinburgh or Glasgow. Please go and experience this magical castle. That's all I ask. Please go see it. It is gorgeous. So that's it for Stirling Castle. I'm going to do fun facts for this episode. I've got a few of them. Crazy. I didn't think I would find this many, but it is believed that real lions were kept in the Lion's Den courtyard, which is here. There is rumors that there is a ghost of a woman named the Green Lady. She is believed to be a maidservant and saved little Queen Mary from a scary situation. This one cracked me up. The first human flight the first human flight attempt was made here in 1507 by Italian alchemist named John Damien. This obviously didn't end well for him, and it cost James IV a lot of money. The oldest football was found here in the Queen's Chambers, and it dates back to the 1540s. That's football, aka soccer in the US, not the OG football. Lastly, outdoor concerts have taken place next to the castle. Artists include REM, Bob Dylan, and Runrig are just a few. So that's it for fun facts. I hope you enjoyed this episode because this was so fun for me. And as you've noticed, I've included a lot of pictures, my own pictures in here that I took myself. And that is it for today. As usual, all of my products are listed in the description box down below. If you liked this episode, please give it a thumbs up. And as always, please leave a comment just to help with the algorithm. You can find me over on Instagram and TikTok at Makeup and Monarchies. If you also felt so generous, please, you can head on over to buymeacoffee.com/makeup and monarchies and help support my endeavors of doing this. It would be greatly appreciated. So with that being said, I think that's about it for today, for this week. I will see you guys next week. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Thanks. Bye.